Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are diving the world of React hooks again, focused on one called UseRef. If you're new to React or hooks sounds a bit confusing, don't worry, I'm going to explain everything in simple terms, and we'll look at some code examples that will make it clear for you on how and when to use ref. Now let's get started. First things first, what is a UseRef? So UseRef is just a new React hook that lets you store a reference to your DOM elements, as we used to do in standard JavaScript. It can also be used to keep some mutable values around for the lifetime of the component. Not like the state, changing a ref does not cause your component to re-render. Okay. Now, there are two things which might sound confusing. So let's go through each and one of them with examples, okay? So the first example is for how to hold a reference to the DOM elements. So in my example right here, all what I have is a button and an input field, okay? And what I want to do is, when I click on my button, I want to trigger focus to my input field. But I want to do that when I click my button here. So that's when UseRef come very handy. So I'll come first, I'll import UseRef from React. Then I'll come here inside my functional component, and remember, React hooks, you can't declare them or use them before the functional component or outside your functional component. It needs to be inside your functional component. So I'll say const, and I know I want my reference to help me point to my input field. So I'll have a meaningful name called, for example, input element. Okay. Then I'll call my ref, and I'll set it to null as default. Now, I got a reference created for me. I name it input element. Now, what I want is, when my component renders, I want my input element to point to the input field. Okay. So we know all HTML elements have a ref attribute, okay, and I'll say ref is equal to my input element, okay, and this what it will do for me now. It will go and assign my input element to my reference here. The one thing I forgot to mention is that the UseRef, when you call it and you hook it to some variable or anything, it will give us back an object. Okay, let me comment this, an object with a current property, then whatever value you have. So at the moment, because I initiate to null, so to be an object with current assigned null. Okay, now let's save this one, and what I will do, just for sake of demoing what happens, I will show you what is the new value. So I'll call useEffect, and if you remember, useEffect will trigger after my first render. Okay, so I'll say useEffect, and I want to cancel log my input element. Save. So you can see here what I have. Current is assigned to the input field. Okay, so what happened is, after my component render first time, immediately my input field got assigned to this input. Okay, so my useEffect was able to pick up the new value of my input element, so it's not anymore null. And you can see the structure is, as I told you, it is an object with a current property and then whatever value you assign to it. Okay, so that's out of the way. Let me remove this useEffect because I don't need it, and let's come back to our button. Okay, we said that what we want is, when we click the button, I want to manipulate my DOM by triggering a focus. Okay, so I can come to my function, which is triggered on the button click, and I will say input element dot current. Okay, then when we say dot current, means that my element, my DOM element dot focus, same as we do in standard JavaScript. Save, and let's see how, if this is working. I'm going to click my input field. You see my focus is highlighted here, and you can see the flashing line on the left. It's flashing, which means my focus is working. So this is an example, a simple example of a DOM manipulation, okay, using the useRef. Now let's look at the other example where it will help us to demonstrate how the useRef can help us to store some mutable value, okay, for some reason. Let's say, for example, the analytic team come to you and they say, okay, I want to track how many times a customer clicks on a button, okay? So tracking this value means that you just want to track it to know how many times the user clicks, but you don't want this to cause any re-renders when you're tracking it, okay? Which means wasted rendering, which means performance issues. So in this example, it's very tiny. It might look okay, senseless, but in real-time applications, it does really make difference, okay? So in this scenario, okay, we will not use useState, of course, we will use useRef. And the way you can do it is that we import useRef again from React. And then we can come here and we can declare a variable, let's say click count, okay? And we'll assign useRef and we'll start with 0. Again, remember this will give us back an object with current set to 0. Now let's go inside our click function and let's increment this one, okay? So the way we do it, we say click count, and we know we have to access dot count first, okay, to have the value. And then we say equal +1. We standard way of JavaScript just to increment by 1. It's like if you say plus plus, okay? So I'll do here a comma, then let's cancel log. Okay. Now let's come to our console, let's clear all this, start fresh, and let's click. Okay, so as soon as we click, we can see here it's counting for us how many times it's clicked. Okay, and of course this count we don't want to do with it anything in the UI. It is nothing for us to interfere with or use it for, so we don't want it to cause any wasted rendering. Now you might be wondering again, how I know this is not causing any re-renders? Easy, the profiler always answers our questions. So we go open the profiler, I will click the recording, then I'll click the button, I'll click it again, then I'll stop profiling. You see, no profiling data has been recorded, okay? Which means my component actually didn't do anything, no re-renders happened. If anything must happen, I will see it here within my UI. And I'll show you if you do the useState, okay? If you use useState, then we come here, we create our state again inside our function component, and let's call it count, comma, set count, useState, and let's start from 0, okay? And we come here and we say set count and we increment it. Set count, and we say previous state, incremented, state +1. And let's cancel log also here, our state. Okay, so basically we're doing now two things. We're using the set state and also the ref, okay? And until now we proved that using useRef does not cause any re-renders. Now, let's hard refresh, okay? First I'll go to my console, click on this button, and you see the first one is giving me the exact value. The second one, it's still giving me 0, which is the previous one. The reason why is it will not give me the current count until my component re-renders again. And of course, my component re-renders again, I will not get this cancel log because this one triggers on the click. Okay, so I can't get the real count that I need when I click on the button itself at the same time. The second issue is when we go to the profiler, I'll hit recording, I'll go click the button once, then go back and stop my profiling. You see, we have now some data being recorded. And if you go down here, that's your component. And you can see it re-ended because the hook number 1 has changed. And in our case, in this scenario, we don't want that because we don't need this count anywhere, okay? We don't want to do any manipulations in our React components because of that state changes, which is obviously just a wasted rendered for no reason, okay? So this is the second scenario when the useRef again is being used. So just keep in mind there are two simple scenarios, just too simple, and we should not use it for any other things to track or manipulate or append children or anything like that. Okay, it should be only used for two things. You want to manipulate your DOM elements, add some styling or focus elements or something like that, or if you want to track some number of clicks, for example, of hovers, things like that. Okay, now let's look at a real-time example of when this is used. Okay, one of the real-time examples you may face, and you may have also noticed through applications, is when you have, for example, a form, okay, where you have to fill some details, but you miss one of them, which is mandatory, okay, and you click submit button, your window will just auto scroll and goes back to the field which you missed, or at least the first one, which is erroring out, and you just focus there. And without you touch any button or anything, you can just go and start typing. Okay, so that means it's detecting your field error and auto scrolling to it, so you can directly input your new data there, which is a really great user example. So how they do that? Simply they just use useRef. Okay, so I'll now show you how to do it. So first thing is that we import the useRef from React. Then we'll come here and we'll create a variable called, for example, username ref. Okay, and we will set it, for example, to useRef, and initial value is null. Okay, and again this one give me back an object with current set to null. Okay, then I'll come to the input field I want, and then I'll create, say, ref, so all our HTML elements have this ref, equal to my username ref. And this, what we'll do, it will assign for me this DOM element to these variables, okay, which can be persistent through my app, and I can access it anytime I want through my application. Now, next thing we will do is that when we click on the button, I have this function triggering. So what I want to do is whenever I click on the button, I want to run some validation, okay? And of course, the first obvious one is to see did someone enter anything or not, okay? So on the onClick function, you will come here, we will say, okay, how now I can access the value, okay, of my input field? Easy, without using a state or anything, because we have a reference, we can do like this, use ref name ref or dot current, as you remember, dot value, same as standard JavaScript. Okay, so I'll check if this doesn't exist. Okay, if the value doesn't exist within my input field, then I'll say focus dot current dot focus. Okay, and also I'll say alert, so I have a pop-up, please enter your username. Oops, spelling wrong again, username. Okay, now let's try this. I will just go back to my console, clean everything, and without typing anything in my field, I'll click login. You see, please enter your username. Okay, and you can see this highlights become darker color. Okay, that's because my focus is there, and without clicking I'm just starting type and it types. Okay, that's mean my focus is working now. And of course you can add more stuff to make it, you know, more fancier, but this example where useRef can be really helpful. Okay, and other good thing is that if I run my profiler, okay, I'll clean all this, I will run my profiler and I'll click login button, then stop my profile. You can see my focus went. I'll stop my profiling, and you can see nothing being recorded. It means I run my validation, my form and everything without executing any wasted rendering that I don't need to run. Okay, so that is a really big benefit when you have big application. Now let's look at another example. Another example we can do is animation, so styling and animation, without causing again any wasted rendering. And also we have to manipulate a DOM here, and that's, if you remember, that's our first scenario when you can use the useRef. So how we do that? Fading means you have something slowly showing up on your screen. That's the animation, which means we start with opacity 0, but then we have to change it, right, to be 100% at some point. So how we can do that, and how we can access our element and be able to manipulate its styling. So easy. Again, we have useRef, we import it from React, and we can declare a new variable called const, and I will say, okay, my element ref, and that's equal to useRef, and we start again with none. Okay, then I will go and say, okay, this element ref, I want it to point to my ref within my diff element. And again, as I say all the time, ref is a default attribute or property you have for your all HTML elements. So I'm saying the variable I created using useRef, I want it to point to this element. Okay, so behind the scene when my combat renders, this element will hold for me the whole div. Okay. So now we go inside the use effect and we can do our magic. First thing, I'll just create a variable const my div element, okay, and I'll try to point to my actual DOM element. So it's element ref dot current. Okay, so that will hold for me my elements. I'll cancel logo, so this one, so you can see it. Div element. Okay, save, and let's hard refresh. Oops, I got something here extra. Hard refresh. And you can see here, that's my elements. Okay, now let's do our manipulation, our DOM manipulation. And this time we'll be manipulating the styles. So I'll say my div element dot style dot transition. Okay, hopefully I don't get the spelling wrong. Equal to opacity 1 second. Okay, so I want it to, the transition will be targeting the property opacity in CSS, and it will take 1 second. Now what I want it to be, so we know to be starting from 0, but what is the end? The end will be 100%, which is 1 style dot opacity, and that will be equal to 1. Let's save. Again, on the hard refresh, you may be able to see it. So you see how it's fading slowly. Maybe let me make this one slower, 3 seconds. Okay, I will hard refresh. You can see slowly it's coming out. Okay, I hope these examples make sense for you. Okay, now there are things we should be avoiding when we are using useRef. So the main thing or common mistakes that we see developers using is that they're forgetting that useRef does not cause re-render. So sometimes they're using useRef and resetting, and they're expecting to cause a re-render for your component to pick up a new values. Forget about that. If you want that behavior, you use the useState. Okay. Also, the other common mistake is that assuming useRef only holds DOM reference. It's also useful for keeping track on mutable values, like we did in previous example. Okay, but it does not again trigger the re-render. Last one, and not last, always there are not more things that developers do, is that overusing the refs for things better handled by his state. Okay, for example, if your updates should cause a re-render, just use useState or useReducer instead. Okay, don't try to overthink or overuse the useRef. So these are things learned from experience. So useRef used only for manipulating your DOM, as we did in these examples, or for keeping track of some value or for some count that you need to use somewhere else, but does not need to cause any re-renders in your component.